Hello, everyone. My name is Lindsay Yashik, and I'm a member of the team of communication specialists at Grassroots Public Affairs. Welcome to our webinar today, reviewing the political landscape in Ottawa and Queen's Park. This session will wrap up before 1 p.m., and it is being recorded for future reference. Please let us know if you'd like a copy of the recording. One of our Ottawa consultants, Reem Wahab, will be monitoring the chat. If you have questions or comments, please enter them there. And to keep you involved, we have a few short, quick polling questions that will pop up on your screen. Your answers will help us frame the narrative around parts of this webinar, so we hope you will participate. You will also receive a very short post-webinar survey, probably tomorrow morning, that will help us improve on the value we bring to our clients. Thank you in advance for completing it. Okay, let's get started. It's my pleasure to introduce Peter Seaman. He is the founder, CEO, and principal consultant at Grassroots Public Affairs. Peter. You're muted, Peter.
I was about to say we do these Zoom meetings to remind ourselves how to use this technology. Thank you. Thank you for the great introduction, and welcome to everyone that's joining us from around Ontario and a few folks from across the country. We've been looking forward to putting on this Lunch and Learn webinar for some time, as we are slowly but surely getting towards the summer months, and wanted to spend a few minutes of your time, your day, reviewing the political landscapes both in Ottawa and Queen's Park, looking back and looking forward, and also giving you a bit of a sample of some of the things that we're going to be spending time on in a planned full-day advocacy workshop in Ottawa this fall. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. The agenda's in front of you. I'm going to jump right in. As always, any thoughts come to mind, questions, comments, put them in the chat box, as Lindsay mentioned. We'll make sure that we address them as we go along. I anticipate that we will be done within about 40 minutes, so we will be very mindful of your time. And again, thanks for joining us. Our first area for discussion will be a review on the federal landscape, and I'm joined by my colleague and senior consultant, Chris Gray. Chris focuses on all of our federal advocacy and communications work up on Parliament Hill. He's been in and around Ottawa pretty much his entire adult working life, resident of Carleton Place, which is now just a suburb of Ottawa, I understand. And he's there a lot. We've worked together for several years. And Chris, welcome. Thanks for joining us. I know you've got a few things you're going to talk about today, and let's jump right in. So our first one, a bit of a parliamentary wrap up in terms of what happened over the last few months and what's most notable that people should be keeping an eye on. Over to you.
All right, Peter, thank you very much for that kind introduction. It's great to be here, and it's great to see everyone on the call. So just a couple things that I wanted to highlight from the federal's perspective. And aside from the main headlines that you and I are always seeing, such as the foreign interference and the whole hubbubaloo with David Johnson, I wanted to highlight a couple of other things for you that are going on and flag a couple of things that I want you to pay attention to, and perhaps I can help you down the road if there's anything that you need with some of these. So one thing that you should know is that Parliament is very quickly wrapping up. The House should rise next Wednesday afternoon. I'm told right after question period, MPs are going to be scrambling to get out of Ottawa on Wednesday afternoon. Therefore, MPs are sitting long hours this week. They're trying to get as much done as possible and get things through before they rise for the summer months. One of the things that has gone through the House is the budget bill, Bill C-47. We all saw, again, the opposition leader was doing some filibustering last week on the budget bill. Obviously, it did pass with the Liberals and the NDP getting together, and it's now being reviewed at the Senate. Other legislation that still needs to be pushed through before the summer session, there's a whole whack of it, but primarily looking at such as SEPA, the Environmental Protection Act, the controversial Online News Act. Both of these bills are in the Senate right now. FINA is the Finance Committee, for those who may not be aware, and I wanted to give you a little bit of tidbit of information. If you have not heard yet, the pre-budget consultations for the 2024 budget will be launched and open this coming Friday. So watch for that. I will flag that for you as well. But the deadline to submit will be August the 4th. And anyone who wants to potentially get before the Finance Committee in the fall needs to talk to an MP on the Finance Committee, and they are supposed to submit their list by August the 18th. With regards to the Ontario leadership, I know that's obviously more Peter's portfolio, but watching that very closely from the Liberals' perspective, there are two Liberals currently MPs who are going to be seeking the leadership. Nathaniel Erskine-Smith from Toronto and Ottawa's Yasser Naqvi both have thrown their hat in the ring to run for the Ontario leadership later this fall. In December, we'll find out who that is. Former Liberal MP Bonnie Crombie has put her hat in the ring just yesterday, and by far she's the front runner. And we're already seeing Mr. Ford starting to make some remarks about her, potentially seeing her as the most formidable foe to him.
So that those of you that know us know that, as I mentioned off the top, Chris worked very closely. He used to be a staffer back in his early career days under the Chrétien government. He's kept close with the federal Liberals. And most people who know me know that I have deep roots on the Conservative side. So I would say to Chris, well, it's clear why all the Liberals are leaving the Liberal Party and looking for other ventures. But we'll talk a little bit more of that later. Let's keep going and talk about the by-elections coming up, Chris, on Monday.
Yeah, we can rib each other a little bit about these by-elections that are coming up on Monday as well. So by-elections traditionally are important for the parties that hold the seats, obviously. And so we're going to see on Monday. I don't foresee a lot of change in these seats right now. Notre Dame in Montreal, it was Garneau's seat. Anna Gainey, who was the Liberal Party president for quite some time. She's also Bob Gainey's daughter. For those who don't know, she is running in that seat. I don't see that changing hands. In Oxford, Ontario, Dave McKenzie was the Conservative MP. The Conservative running there is Arpan Khanna, who, Peter, I believe you know. Yep. But that's also kind of an interesting riding. Peter, I don't know what you're getting sense on that, but with McKenzie coming out and supporting the Liberal candidate down there, it's caused a little bit of controversy. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
It'll be a Conservative win. We know that. The other's always a bit of controversy and rumor in politics. So I think we're both betting on the ridings all coming back the way they are. But it will be interesting to look at the actual numbers. As you said a moment ago, by-elections are tough to read, to know exactly how they might follow. But I anticipate a whole lot of scrutiny and review on margins of victory and outcomes. And the reason I think we put up the Maxime Bernier picture here, he's by far not a prominent leader in the House of Commons, a former MP under the Conservative Party, but is making his last stand, so to speak, in the by-election in Manitoba. And I think, Chris, you mentioned earlier, that's the Bloc had a pretty good turnout there last election.
Yeah, no, the PPC did have a good
PPC, yeah.
It did have a good turn. I'm not sure the Bloc's riding there, but so it's obviously a riding that the Conservatives want and need to hold on to. I believe that they will, quite frankly, but it's interesting to see how much effort they will need to put into there to hold that seat. There clearly are a lot of Bernier supporters across the country still, and a rural riding in Manitoba like that one is going to be fairly fascinating to see. In the 2021 election, we did see the PPC vote take away 21 seats from the Conservatives across the country. So that's not insignificant, and 14 of those went to the Liberals. So it is going to be interesting to see what happens there on Monday. And just one other thing that I wanted to mention, we're going to have at least one more by-election coming up, as Aaron O'Toole, the former Conservative leader, has stepped away. He's retiring as an MP. So there will be a by-election needed for the Durham riding. And just the last thing that I wanted to check in on and provide some information on, I'm not going to dive really deep into this, but it's something that I wanted everyone to be aware of, are some of the changes that are coming to the code of conduct for lobbyists. And so there are some federal changes coming up, and they will be taking effect on July the 1st. The last update was 2015. So the commissioner is really looking to clean up some of the language after we've had a few years of this. The objective is to foster a more transparent and ethical lobbying of federal officials. So as I said, they're really looking to upgrade some language here. There is a low value gift amount of $40 allowed. That is considered a token of appreciation, someone speaking at your event or what have you. There's also a $40 limit on food and beverage, including receptions. There's a combined $200 annual limit to a DPOH, MP, senator, etc., for gifts and hospitality. What I primarily say is just don't do it if you can. Just stop or don't give gifts to MPs unless it's again a nominal gift, a very small, a pen, something like that, a little notepad. That's fine, but ordinarily I would counsel clients and anyone lobbying not to do it.
And I would just add to the most important thing too, for those that may be new to the world of advocacy or lobbying, there are a lot of stringent rules in force at all levels of government, some tougher and more critical than others. The federal one is probably the most comprehensive. I know that the Ontario government's been considering updating their lobbyist conduct rules to mirror the feds, but have not done so yet. But we need to be on top of that for ourselves and on behalf of our clients. And Chris, I know you spent some time reviewing that, so that's much appreciated.
Just the one more thing I wanted to mention was with regard to political work. You know, you can work on a campaign, but again, be very careful about doing that. There's a 12-month cooling off period that's being clarified in the new code of conduct. As long as you're don't work full time on a campaign if you expect to lobby is the short answer there. You can still make donations and attend events, etc., but yep. I would steer clear of it.
All right, Chris. Well, I know you'll be busy on the barbecue circuit this summer. I thought it was fascinating, again, to put my blue hat on to look at the Toronto Star's headline yesterday saying Pierre Poilievre has a 9-point lead over the Liberals and the Conservatives, although I did read that, not surprisingly, the overwhelming majority of Canadians were looking for a change, and that's pretty typical of any government that's been in power as long as the Liberals have. So, election this fall, Chris, or not?
No, not unless something explodes. There's a decent chance. They're not supposed to have one until 2025, but I would be fairly surprised if we didn't have an election at some point next year. Okay,
to wrap up our federal stuff, Reem, can you put up the poll for the federal issues just to get some interaction with everybody watching online? We want to ask you, if an election were held in the next 6 to 12 months, what do you think would be the most dominating issue? We did this on our last webinar 4 months ago. I won't tell you what the lead issue was, but it's in the mix right now. So we're just curious to get your thoughts. Politics is a funny game. The lead issue today can not be the lead issue next week, depending on what happens in the news. And I know that everyone's been paying close attention to all of the issues that are up on screen here. So we're going to keep that open for a few more seconds. We'll do a little bit of a transition. We'll move over to some provincial topics.
Peter, I wish I could vote on this, but
yeah, well, which did you see the choices? Oh yeah, they're right.
I did see the choices. I would say for me personally, it's inflation. It's if that keeps rising and it keeps impacting interest rates the way it has been, I can't. It hurts me to say this as a Liberal, but it's going to hurt them significantly. You're
not alone. You're not alone. So
not alone in the coming months. So that is not helping our Liberal friends.
Yeah. So healthcare was the runaway favorite when we did this poll a few months ago. So interesting. Still a concern, obviously, for a lot of people, but not to the extent of the cost of putting gas in your car or paying for your groceries. All right, Chris, thank you for your time, sir. I appreciate it. We are going to move along and just going to remove that if you could. Okay, perfect. All right, I think we're right on time here. We're just going to move back. So I think I saw Sabrina join us. Sabrina, welcome, and thank you for making time to join us again. It's my pleasure to welcome Sabrina Nanji. Sabrina is a 7-year veteran of Queen's Park Press Gallery, has worked previous to her current job. She worked for the Toronto Star. She regularly appears on TV as a commentator and an opinion leader in terms of all things provincial. We're going to talk about a few issues here. And she's also the publisher of the Queen's Park Observer, which is a very fascinating daily newsletter that she puts out summarizing all the top events and news stories going around Queen's Park. And I think she always gives a bit of a special for those that attend these webinars. If you want to take advantage of a 1-week promo, she'll make that available to you. And hey, Sabrina, how are you?
Hey, thanks for having me. Happy Wednesday and happy summer, I guess, at Queen's Park. It's
Yeah.
not as quiet as I guess we would have expected.
Yeah, right. So, hey, but before we jump into provincial stuff, you heard the tail end of the federal. Do you pay much attention to the federal political? You must. I mean, you're a political junkie like all of us. So what's your take on the landscape there just before we move into provincial stuff?
Yeah, I heard a little bit. I just caught the tail end of what you guys were talking about just before I hopped in this room. And I think I agree. I'm not really holding my breath for an election coming up, but obviously everything is so connected between Queen's Park and the feds right now. I think that, Ford and Trudeau are playing nice. It's politically advantageous for both of them right now. I think maybe when we start to see those two maybe butting heads a little bit more, that's maybe when you can expect it'll be election time if you're reading the tea leaves.
Yeah. Well, it's always fascinating too to watch the interconnection between different levels of government, right? Some diehard conservatives get frustrated when they see Premier Ford playing nice with the Prime Minister, but that needs to be done for a whole bunch of reasons. Look, let's jump into political stuff. So when we chatted back in January, we were looking ahead to the rest of the year. And I don't know about you, I think the Ford government, although there's been some controversies, they've really benefited by a weak opposition, but that looks like it's going to maybe change soon. First of all, on the Ford government, what's your takeaway? What surprised you in the last 6 months? And what should be their concern going through the summer and coming into the fall session, which will start off their second full year of their second term?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a roller coaster first year of the second mandate for the Ford government. I think some of that was expected. We know that, no matter what political stripe you are, governments will tend to get out there, controversial, maybe potentially unpopular, explosive stuff out in the beginning of their mandate as far away from an election time. So we've kind of seen the Ford government do that a little bit, stuff that they weren't really talking about during the campaign, this controversial carve up of the Greenbelt, this big to kind of fulfill their big ambitious housing plan. They're looking to tackle the surgical backlog with expanding private delivery of certain OHIP funded services through Bill 60. And now they've moved forward with the breakup of Peel Region, which I think is also significant. Yes. Today, we just heard news from Markham Mayor Frank Scarpitti, who's saying that he wants York Region, which is also under review along with the other regional governments, to be amalgamated into one big mega municipality of York, which would be 9 municipalities. So I think they've certainly rocked the boat a little bit, but they've also set this bar for themselves very high. A lot of this stuff is controversial, but I think that, the general public will be still happy with the Ford government if they can, follow through on what they say these controversial moves will do. I mean, on housing, that's top of mind for the public, I think, by far, along with the cost of living, which is, of course, included in with housing. And so if, 4 years from now in 2026, we've got Bonnie Crombie, leader of the Liberal Party, saying, the Ford government promised housing here, it's a big empty field, or they promised a hospital here, there's nothing here, that's going to be where they're weak. And of course, if it's somebody like Bonnie Crombie, which we can dig into, I think they should be shaking in their boots a little bit, as much as the Premier likes to say he's unfazed by her entry into the leadership race for the Liberals today, officially, actually.
Yeah. Well, let's jump into that in a minute. I have to ask you, and we were exchanging a couple emails leading up to today about the rumors of a cabinet shuffle. It seemed pretty hot there a couple of weeks ago, died down. I would have thought they would do it before they break for the summer, but what I'm hearing is it may not be a major one, but you're closer to it than me. What are you hearing?
Yeah, those rumors have kind of been a bit evergreen, and I love the speculation, of course, and to play like musical chairs with who's going where. I was hearing that it would happen in June, this month. Obviously, there's been a lot of heat on certain ministers. I'm thinking of Caroline Mulroney, whose name keeps coming up as potentially getting moved. Not that she's not, totally capable. She's very strong on policy, but she's not exactly someone who is willing to, jump in front of the media, hold a scrum, and that seems to be changing a bit. She has come in front of us a bit more lately, but I guess the thinking there was to move her from transportation, which is now becoming a very high profile file. What with the Ontario line chugging along, there's been some controversies with the crosstown delays, and so there's some thinking that maybe she would get moved into a more low profile portfolio, something like Treasury Board. But I think now that there's been a lot of heat on her, myself, some other columnists in the press gallery have been, calling out her handling of this file. I think that they might wait now is the thinking that it could happen later this summer, potentially August. Because when you kind of shuffle around folks in files that are controversial, I'm thinking of health too, it can sort of seem like an admission of failure on that front.
Right.
And so these things tend to be held very, very tightly close to the vest here. And the people who really know what's going on don't really always do the talking about it. But of course, it is a very fun speculation, something that everyone's talking about at Queen's Park. I think it would make sense for the Ford government to shake up their front bench a little bit, even if it's a small thing. They've got a lot of new MPPs actually from regions that they want represented in cabinet. I'm thinking of Windsor, the Windsor area in particular. They managed to pick up seats there. So we might see some folks like Anthony Liardi or Andrew Dowie, the new MPPs, promoted to either a junior minister or taking on a bigger role, that kind of thing. And it makes sense. We're 1 year into the mandate. They might be wanting to look for a refresh. Doing it over the summer would give politicians a time to, get up to speed on their briefing books before the start of the fall session. So I'm still counting on it happening this summer, but exact timing is always a little bit iffy.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, we'll have to wait and see. Unlike some of the other bigger controversies, I'm thinking of former Minister Phillips and some of the almost scandals that they had to do a cabinet shuffle in a hurry. It doesn't seem to be that kind of pressure right now. Okay, let's flip and talk about opposition. As I mentioned, and we all know, the Ford government won a massive majority in 2018, an even bigger one in 2022, and took both party leaders out. So it made things a little easier, I have to think, in the legislature without having vocal permanent opposition, despite the efforts of the interim leaders. The NDP selected their leader, or chose or claimed their leader, I guess, a few months ago. And we'll get to Marit Stiles in a few minutes. But Liberal leadership seemed a little bit of a sleepy affair until yesterday. And I got the sense that you've already got your favorite picked here. So what do you think? Are we going to see other candidates drop out? Is Bonnie going to be acclaimed, or what's going to happen?
Well, I think we have seen that a little bit. I mean, I don't think anyone's going to hand this to Bonnie Crombie, but certainly, we've seen polling. There's been a lot of excitement about her. She is a media darling, I have to admit. She's fun to talk to. She loves to, hold Doug Ford's feet to the fire. And when you're a reporter, someone who's not afraid to come out swinging against Doug Ford, give the opposite view, that's gold for us. And of course, within her own party, a lot of people see her as their savior. The Liberals I'm talking to, she's painted herself as a centrist, even gone a bit right of center, which she says what elections are won on in Ontario. And then we saw Nate Erskine-Smith, the federal MP for Beaches East York, who's also running, also considered another front runner. He was the first one in the race, but he sort of pounced on that and said, I'm going left. We shouldn't be afraid of that. This is a fight for the party's soul. And we're talking about this before we're talking about Marit Stiles. So as much as it's exciting and entertaining to watch a bloodbath for the Liberals, it's going to be good for the party. There's no bad press that can come from having a contested leadership race. There's also Ted Hsu in there, Yasser Naqvi, Adil Shamji, another MPP. It's expected to jump in any day now. And then we had Stephanie Bowman, the rookie MPP who replaced Kathleen Wynne in Don Valley West. She backed out, and she's expected to, throw her support behind Bonnie, because this is a very competitive race for a number of reasons. The bar to get in, you have to raise $100,000, another 25 grand, but it's refundable. There's signatures, there's all these rules, so it's a high bar, and it's a full-on leadership contest, which is more than the NDP could say. We're talking about it now there's buzz. It could attract different people to the party, and also raise money clearly for the party too. If all of these candidates need to raise at least $100,000, and that goes a long way for the Liberals. I think even in the polls, we're still seeing them being competitive against Doug Ford. I'll just add, there was an interesting number in Abacus Data's most recent poll this week. I think for the Star that you had mentioned, Peter, that said that 45% of people were ready to change up the government, and that they believe there was an alternative on the scene that they would feel comfortable with voting for. And I think that has to do. They weren't specific in who the alternative was, but I think that now it's starting to take shape, even with Marit Stiles having a fresh face. Of course, it's taking time for her to, get her footing in that leadership role. And I think that's understandable for politicians, but certainly the buzz is about the Liberals. And I think, Bonnie Crombie is someone that could really give Ford and the PCs a run for her money.
So remind everybody on the timing on this. It's later on. It's in December, I believe they'll announce the leader, the winner.
That's right. December 2nd. They'll be voting the weekend before. It's exciting because this is the first time the Ontario Liberal leadership race is going to be one member, one vote, which is kind of what we see for most other political parties in the country, which means that, the more folks you can sign up and show up to vote for you, that's who's going to end up taking the crown, instead of having their previous delegated system, which was, representatives from ridings go and pick. This is more of a bit of a free-for-all. And so I think that's also why we're seeing such a competitive race here, is that a lot of these folks feel like they can do the legwork to win this leadership.
Last thing before we move along with respects to the NDP, they've been the opposition for a while. They elected a new leader, as you mentioned. There seems to be this big fight on the left to see which party can garner most of the progressive vote. What are they going to have to do to stay relevant or to stay in the official opposition seat? Or is it inevitable that the Liberal Party will surpass them after being in the wilderness for 8 years? What's your guess on that? Or will it be increased collaboration, I guess, like we're seeing on the federal level? That's another opportunity.
Yeah, I think that, the Liberals and the NDP are also political rivals too, we could call it, because there is this fight for second place. That was kind of the scene, in the last election. It was kind of like Ford was on track to win another majority. Who's going to be official opposition? And so I think that we are starting to see, some political divides here, like in terms of ideologies. If the winner is Nate Erskine-Smith for the Liberals, I could see the NDP trying to out-left the Liberals, and if it's Bonnie going in the center, they'll certainly attack that too. I think a lot of it comes down to the leader, and like I said, Marit Stiles has kind of had a bit of a failure to launch here. It's still early days in her tenure, but she has been in that leader's seat for a while now. She's had a full session. Me, in my opinion, I thought that question period was rather weak. It was tough for the NDP to generate stories out of that. They really failed to, I guess, make a big splash. And part of that could be due to, Marit Stiles not having a contested leadership race where we tend to get to know the people more. There's a bit more of a policy discussion. Folks in the general public are paying a bit more attention. Of course, there's so much happening municipally and federally. There's a lot for them to dig into. But I think with Marit, there's still time for her to really introduce herself to people. And I should mention, the Abacus Data poll really had the NDP and the Liberals neck and neck in terms of, vote intention at this point. It was within the margin of error, I think, the difference. And so, it's not over yet, but I certainly have to say that I think Marit Stiles has been struggling a bit more than we would have expected. And they're going to have to really, show who she is and how she's different from Andrea Horwath in order to be, competitive in 2026.
Yeah. Okay, I think we have a question on there about grading the Ford government. Reem, can you put that up for everyone's view? We're just saying, okay, it's the school's out, it's June, kids are getting their report cards. If folks had to grade the current government 1 year after they were reelected, let's see what the marks look like. And you're welcome to stay with us, Sabrina, if you can. I'm going to transition and talk to a new consultant that joined us. I'll put these results up here in a second. I'm just giving everyone a chance to vote, who used to work at Queen's Park and has some unique perspectives and insights on how that works. So thanks again, Sabrina. I really appreciate it. Let's just take a look before we jump in with Artem here. We'll see what the results look like. Well, let's just share what we have so far. So there you go. No A's, a few B's, a bunch of C's, some D's, and a whole bunch of fails. Uh-oh. Okay, well, that shows that we have a very diverse audience here today, which is great. People that are big fans of the Ford government. Well, none, I guess, that are big fans. Some that say he's doing okay, and some that saying there's lots of room for improvement. We'll keep that report card to ourselves. Artem, welcome. Artem Chaplinski, a good friend of mine, someone that I've known for several years. Artem originally immigrated from Ukraine as a young child, I guess, and grew up here in Canada, has strong connections. And Artem, I know we're all thinking about your family back home, enjoying some of the challenges that they are living through right now, unfortunately. Artem recently left the Premier's office at Queen's Park. He was there for 4 years and through the pandemic and had to work through some challenging times. And we're just delighted to have him join our firm. He's a graduate of the University of Western, an honors degree in international relations. He speaks several languages. He's a project manager and an IT guy, very analytical thinker, and interested in getting involved in government relations. And I was thrilled to extend an invitation to have him join us. So Artem, thank you. And thank you for joining us, and thanks for joining today. Let's jump right in. I had a few questions I wanted to throw at you, and then I know we got a couple slides we'll pull up. So first off, as I mentioned, you worked in the Premier's office and through a challenging time with the pandemic for everyone, including government. And that experience must have been interesting. I think you were there. You can remind us a little bit before it started, but without giving away any secrets, what would you say resonates with this government in terms of advocacy messages, or what doesn't? And I can pull up the slides whenever you want.
Indeed, Peter, working in the Premier's office provided an extraordinary vantage point to understand the focus of the government. But before we jump into the advocacy part, I think it is beneficial to give everyone an insight into how a typical government office is structured when it comes to staff.
Okay.
This information is available online, but I just created a simple summary based on the office of the Premier's in particular. As evidenced by the staff composition, communications staff make up 63%, HR and public appointments take 25%, and policy is just 12%. Of course, communications is a broad category comprised of people working with the press, those setting the strategic direction, staff who are responsible for events and tour, and so on. But at the end of the day, it's all communications, right? It's sending the message to the people of Ontario on what the government is doing. What I want you and our viewers to think about is this. Political offices are very reactionary to and receptive of public opinion, which often guides policy development, a lot of times more so than it should. So when pitching to the government, your pitch must help the government sustain their positive image and have the following three components, in my opinion. First is a clear and concise summary of the ask, the public benefit to explain why they should look into this, and there must be some weight behind it, something that shows that the idea is live and well, and many stakeholders in Ontario are watching this. Conversely, what doesn't work is vague, self-serving, and narrowly focused advocacy initiatives that do not connect to the broader public benefit or the government's policy objectives.
Okay, so interesting stuff. And you worked quite a bit, and you weren't like some of the staffers who kind of spent their entire working career in government, but you did work at City Hall as well. I think you said for a brief period of time in Toronto.
That's right.
So let me go back, and one of the exciting things that Grassroots is looking forward to is Artem's going to be heading up our digital division of services for clients. We've been doing that already before, but not in a comprehensive way that we will moving forward. So the full suite of digital components that will support advocacy campaigns, we'll be adding information on that shortly. When you were in the Premier's office and you'd get an initial email or a proposal or a solicitation for a meeting from a group you've never heard of before, what would you typically do first? Where would you look? What sort of stuff, would you take a look at to make an assessment on who this group was and whether they would warrant your time or the Premier's time?
I'll give you an example. My first exposure to this was in 2019 when I joined, when we were identifying opportunities to improve healthcare in Ontario.
Yep.
An organization approached us asking for funding to help them develop a way to share those old yellow children's vaccination booklets in an app with school boards to make it easier. And they succeeded for two reasons. Their messaging, their ask, they involved stakeholders and public benefit were very well defined and were consistently repeated throughout their materials, and on many occasions also during in-person meetings, in email communication, and interestingly enough, a lot of people don't think about this online. Many don't think that government relations and advocacy require a solid online presence management strategy, but it does. And this leads me to the second reason behind their success and the answer to your question regarding the research that we typically do on an advocacy initiative that we've heard about for the first time. But first, let me preface with how a typical day for a policy advisor looks like. So 29% is usually spent on research and analysis. Another 29 is typically the actual policy development, and this involves working with stakeholders across ministries, making sure you're connecting all the dots and the right people are at the table. 23% for meetings and review of proposals, and that's the time that advocacy initiatives are competing for. And 19% are for the preparation of recommendations and briefings. Now, you might ask me how I know about this, but you've said it. I'm a project manager. I like to write down things and know how much time I'm spending on things, and also just talking to people. Dozens of advocacy. Yep.
Go ahead. Keep going.
Dozens of advocacy initiatives are competing for less than 1 hour of a policy advisor's time each day. So if you send an email that is convoluted and doesn't appeal within the first 30 seconds, in fact, I think the attention spans right now are like 8.25 seconds, or it might simply be too long and you may never hear back.
Yeah.
If you already have their attention, then that's a different story.
Well, it's just,
yeah.
I keep telling clients too, and you've certainly seen it and lived it, the volume of things that come into a political office every day, and people are generally polite and will listen to a pitch, but the folks presenting it have to be mindful of how many other competing pitches are going on every day, every week, every month, and therefore better make theirs as focused and on point as possible. Okay, last question, because I know you have a lot of experience in sort of the area we touched on with respects to digital media, the whole world of social media. I mean, it's broad, it can be confusing. You can go down the rabbit hole and never have enough time or spend enough money to feel that you have all the bases covered. I'm not talking about individuals, although some people, professionals, will focus on their personal brand, but I'm thinking about organizations and companies as it relates to advocacy and communicating with government. What would you share with the groups or people that may be listening in terms of what their primary focus should be on all things digital? What should they tackle first? What should they make sure is as up to date as possible when engaging government, given all the things they could be looking at?
So if you have a great initiative, which will make the government look good because they're looking for these media opportunities, you really need to focus on the brand identity, consistency in print and digital assets, and online presence. Because when you're competing against the dozens of initiatives for the time of each political staffer and for limited government resources, your advocacy campaign needs to stand out. And I'll keep repeating this to everyone. This can simply be achieved by having a clear and consistent messaging that must also be visible online through a simple Google search, because that's the first thing you usually do if you don't know about something. You just go on Google and try to look them up.
Yeah, great. Okay, well, it's right in line with our continued and repeated focus on clarity, consistency, and collaboration, and making sure our messages are very much focused and strategically delivered. So Artem, again, welcome to the team. Look forward to working with you. I know that some of our clients will be meeting him soon, and we're going to move on. So thank you for that. And I am going to go back and share the screen here quickly. And we're going to move on to my good friend and colleague, Ray Pons. And Ray, I believe you were able to connect after some short technical difficulties. If you're there, flip your camera on. There he is. For those that haven't met Ray and don't know Ray, I got to say he's been a longtime friend. I hazard to think now, Ray, when I was thinking about this before, you and I met almost 30 years ago. It must have been in kindergarten, right?
Yeah.
So and but for the last 22 years, Ray's been a keynote speaker. He works in areas of leadership, communication, strategic planning. He created and facilitated the Pro Track Speaker Academy for CAPS. That's the Canadian Association of Professional Speakers. It's a year-long program of quarterly weekend boot camps for professionals wanting to enter the world of speaking for a living. And he says he twice finished second to the person who later finished second in the World Championships of Public Speaking. A friend, a friend and mentor, and maybe he's got me to blame for pulling him into the world of politics, because I think he lived a pretty simple, stress-free life before I said, hey, Ray, you should come and join me here in this world. So Ray and I have worked together for quite some time, and we wanted to have a bit of a conversation. We're not going to do so much a presentation like we've done before, but as I mentioned earlier, we do want to touch on some of the things that we plan to cover in our full day workshop that we're planning in Ottawa. Some of you may have attended the one we did in Ottawa. We did another one in Toronto about 3-4 years ago, pre-pandemic, and are looking forward very much to doing these again in person. So Ray, when you first got some exposure to politics, and I'm sure, like anything, you've followed it, you voted, you probably admired some and despised other political candidates over your life. But when you started working with me and with other folks, candidates, was anything surprise you, or did you sort of recognize that the fundamentals of effective communication that you know so well apply equally to this world of not only politics, but government relations and advocacy? What was your initial impressions, or what did you learn from that exposure early on?
Yeah, indeed. I didn't so much learn anything as was reminded that success typically comes down to the basics, the fundamentals. Much of the training we have done, and I have done as part of that training, was all about the technical aspects of speaking. You know, what to say, what not to say, assertive can never be the wrong choice, but it's rarely the easy choice, the obvious choice. And particularly when it comes to, we maintain the best people to speak for an industry, for a cause, are the people who every day live, breathe, and work and sweat in the industry. The challenge is we've come to realize, as Artem pointed out, you know, members of parliament have the attention span of a mosquito. And we've got to break through the noise of the literally hundreds of applications, requests they have for a meeting. You got to be able to distinguish yourself. So I spent a great deal of time talking about the technicalities of speaking. In September, I am the coordinator of comfort zone confrontation, and I believe I'm going to hit quota early because we are going to address the fear of public speaking that almost everybody has, but few will admit.
Yeah, that's a good point. And when we think about public speaking, I think many people think, well, boy, that means getting in front of a room of a whole bunch of people that are going to look at me. It doesn't. It often is just walking into that, could be casual but formal opportunity to meet with a minister or government official for the first time and stay focused and speak clearly and concisely about the issues that matter to you and the issues that you're there for, and not fall victim to the nervous habits we can all have, whether Absolutely. It's filler words or the getting off message. So, you
know, the truth is, fear of public speaking is much more common than many people will admit. You and I were talking. There was on the Seinfeld show, and for those of you who either don't remember it or never saw it, the Seinfeld show was a half-hour sitcom, and it began with Jerry Seinfeld showing 30 or 45 seconds of his stand-up comedy routine. And the one that is available today on YouTube, and it resonates with me just because of the profession I'm in. He said a recent study determined that fear of public speaking is the #1 fear of most people. Second was fear of death. fear of dying, which of course means that if people have to go to a funeral, they would prefer to be the person in the casket than delivering the eulogy. It made me laugh, but it also made me realize, you know what? We got to put people to the test.
Right.
It's one thing for me to give feedback to people. I remember giving feedback to a member of parliament that I was dealing with, and she then got, a week later, she apparently claims that she followed the suggestions that we came up with together and got a standing ovation from a United Nations audience. And the joy on her face, it was energetic. In September, we're bringing the Grassroots videographer with us. And everyone that attends the September all-day workshop, you will have the opportunity to get some added value. You will leave with a 60 to 90-second clip of you delivering the opening of your pitch to a member of provincial parliament or a member of federal parliament. I'll give you some feedback, but the biggest feedback that you'll get will be looking and hearing yourself. It'll be an embarrassment for many. But you know what? Every time I've done it, I may not have liked it. I may not have enjoyed looking a bit foolish, but I learned so much from it.
Absolutely.
You know? So that's one of the things we're going to be shifting away from technicalities to the actual practicality. Learn by doing, do it.
So we're going to do that, and we're still putting together our agenda for the September event. Reem, could you put up the last question? I know we're losing a few people as we're getting close to the hour here, so put up the last one. Just with respects, I'd love to get your feedback, and we're going to put out a more comprehensive survey tomorrow to ensure that when we build the agenda for this workshop, if we've got you inclined or interested to come and join us, we'd love to know sort of what topics you would find interesting. We talked about several of them today, with respects to the individual messaging, the campaign messaging, learning about things going on in government. You can click as many as you like. I suspect we're going to get votes across the board. So look, this has been fun, Ray. I'm glad, and on a Grassroots team, I like to say we became virtual before it was cool to be virtual, in that my good friend Ray moved to Quebec. He's outside in Joliette, outside of Montreal. Chris and Reem that are here outside of Ottawa. Lindsay and I and Artem are in the GTA. But through the magic of technology, we're able to keep in touch regularly. But we still do benefit by meeting face-to-face as much as we can. We had a good workshop in Toronto, collectively, the team, about a month ago. And nothing beats breaking bread and having a meal and working together face-to-face. And we look forward to doing that with some clients and prospects in September. So here you go. Here's the results of this. Not surprising, we got a bunch of different responses. People really like the information on current government priorities, so we plan to delve in that a little bit deeper. Crafting effective advocacy campaigns. We've got a few votes for public speaking, and the other things are all there. So listen, we're going to fine tune this. We want to make a full day for the workshop. We understand that if you're going to travel to Toronto or Ottawa, want to make sure that we make it action packed. We're fully confident we're going to do that, but we welcome your feedback to ensure that it is an excellent use of your time and money. So with that, I'm going to wrap up. I don't see if there's any questions in the chat box. You know how to get a hold of us in terms of, I'm just going to take this off screen, close this up. In terms of Grassroots, oops. We want to thank you for your time joining us today from wherever you were. I hope that we provided you some things to think about. I know that many of you are clients that are on the call today, so we'll be in touch. And for those of you that aren't, if you have any questions, visit our website, find our contact information there, or just send an email in response to the many emails you got from us for today's event, and we'd be happy to follow up. I wish you a happy and safe summer, and we'll look forward to working with you in the fall.